I get from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Havertown, Waverly Road, to a cruise on the Mediterranean and meeting Princess Grace? Well, it turns out, in 7th grade, I had a father I loved. I called him my favorite daddy, and he was my hero. And he was blue blood, and there was a statue of him, of his relative, General Lou Wagner, in a Civil War hero in Philadelphia. And my father emulated him and wanted to be rich and famous. His favorite book was Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, if anybody remembers that, by Napoleon Hill. In any event, he had 3 jobs. He was a workaholic, and he worked, he sold insurance, and when there was a fire on the block, he would go the next day to sell them fire insurance, and my mother would say, "Ach, du lieber Herr, how dare you, how can you embarrass us?" So I loved him for it because he had chutzpah. He was totally outrageous. He was courageous, and also my mother was Pennsylvania Dutch, and she was the eldest in a family of 12 farmers from Shoemakersville, PA. And she felt that books were dust catchers, and my father loved books and had a collection, and therefore I became a writer. So as far as my father's other exploits were, my mother was very sexually repressed. The Pennsylvania Dutch are generally, and so I became a sex symbol. In any event, I wasn't allowed to wear a nylon blouse. Remember, the bra strap showed, and if I went out of the house and my slip was showing, I was criticized. So what my father liked to do was drive into nudist colonies and park in the middle and look at the naked people while my mother would say, "Oh, Herb, get me out of here." And my sister and I would laugh in the back, and as we'd peek up from the windows. So he liked to provoke my mother, and that became a sport in the family. In any event, in 7th grade, he came down with a mysterious twitch, and nobody knew what it was. So in 9th grade, a doctor said, "Well, there's an experimental operation." He was at the Lankenau. He said, "I think we should give him a lobotomy," and that's what they did. They gave him a lobotomy, and they apologized because during the operation, they found out he had been suffering from Parkinson's disease, which a lobotomy does not cure, but exasperates it. So now his favorite hobby was to weed. He'd be down on all fours because he didn't twitch. He climbed up the stairs on all fours. He grunted. He was like an animal. But he still laughed at my jokes. They sent him to an asylum because they were worried about the effect he'd have on me, but his mind was fine. So he'd make me baskets, and I loved them. And finally they let him loose, and I worked at Howard Johnson's. I worked my way through college, and I used to steal mint chocolate chip ice cream for him. That was his favorite. But I became a workaholic, and after my father's suffering, I managed to attract men I could take care of who were half there for me as well. I had a lot, and I liked famous men because I was kind of a detective for fame. My father wanted to know all about it, and I really wanted to find out what this was about that had caused him to suffer so. So I was on a quest for fame throughout my life, and I met many of them. But I found that self-esteem doesn't come with money or fame. Ego might, but they're not the same thing. Ego and self-esteem are not the same thing. So I went off to Penn State, and I fell in love with a football player. His name was Dick Hoke. He's down here somewhere. Where are the men? Over here. Here, very handsome. Look at him. Isn't he beautiful? So we became engaged, and I thought, whoop-de-doo. He started to play for the Steelers, and he was paid $10,000 in 1959, and that was a lot of money to us then. Now they get millions. $10,000 to have his knees broken. So what happened was, then he became a coach for the Steelers, But I had trouble talking to him. He was a history major, and I went home and I taught now at Springfield, Delaware County. I graduated early because I wanted to have a Ford Falcon. Remember those, any of you? A maroon Ford Falcon. I had a black top. It was really spiffy. So I wanted to graduate. I graduated early, and I wanted the car. I taught in Lower Marion, which is where Princess Grace was from, that area, for 3 months. But then I taught for a year in my own hometown, which I preferred. I didn't like Lower Marion because the children, a lot of them had limousines bringing them to school. They had no love. They had all this money. But my art room had a hole in it, about 10 feet in circumference, and a dirt by it. They didn't fix it, but the band had new uniforms, so I felt their values were really askew. So I went back to Springfield, and I liked teaching there. And then it was the year, remember '63 when Kennedy died? And I would sit there drawing I think they're called canyons or cannons. Remember the the buggy drew the coffin through the streets, and I would draw that. And my father would be twitching next to me, and for some reason, Dick was still up in Pittsburgh, in Johnstown, and I thought, something's wrong with this picture. I have to get away. Now, if I had been a man, I would have joined the Marines, but I was a woman. So what did I do? I wanted to become a stewardess or an airline hostess. So I tried with TWA, and they said no, but I don't listen to no in my life, which I recommend to you. I persevered, and I went to Pan Am, and I became a Pan Am stewardess. I liked Dick, but I had gotten bored, so I broke off the engagement. Then my first flight was to Bermuda. And I remember throwing up as we landed and thinking, well, at least I'm not in Philadelphia. But now I'm happy to be here and I'm back home. But I threw up for 2 years. I lost so much weight, I would fly from New York to Bangkok. I got pills in Bangkok to sleep because I had developed a sleeping pill addiction. My father, we took all his pills. He took L-Dopa and all that. And so I was flying New York, Paris, London, Beirut, Monrovia, Liberia, Bangkok. 2 years throwing up. I started to hate flying, and this is what I looked like. I weighed 108 pounds. And I said, something's wrong with this picture again. So I thought, passengers said you have beautiful eyes, you should model. So I started to model in Paris, and I said, if I don't get a job in 2 months, I'm going to go back to flying, because nobody knew I was a stewardess. I was sort of undercover. I was an undercover model. I liked that. Dorian Lee was my agent, and Susie Parker was her sister. Remember Susie Parker, the name? You may remember her. And Dorian was quite beautiful, and she was involved with a race car driver. She wanted my name to be Lagelle. My maiden name is Carole Wagner, and I said, oh no, that's pretentious. I didn't like pretense then, and I don't like pretense now. I absolutely hate it. And I'm a writer, but I won't play the literary game. I won't do that. Nope, nope, nope. I don't even care about grammar. So in any event, yeah, my first job was this. Come on, Herbert, let's show them the first stop. Go off.